On trial in Tehran, about 100 prominent opponents of the government are in the dock, accused of fomenting unrest after the country's disputed presidential election in June, which resulted in Mahmoud Ahmadinejad getting a second term. The defendants include former vice presidents and government ministers, journalists and lawyers. It's the first time since Iran's Islamic Revolution 30 years ago that so many senior figures have been put on trial. The charges against them include acting against national security by planning unrest, attacks on state and military buildings, and conspiring against the ruling system. Under Islamic law, acting against national security is punishable by death. Iran's opposition leader Hossein Mousavi has described the hearings as show trials. But what is going on in Tehran today runs deeper.
There is a struggle going on between two factions inside the regime. One is the clerical class focused on Ayatollah Rafsanjani, who have grown very wealthy and, in the eyes of some Iranians, very corrupt. Against them are those followers of Ahmadinejad, the president, who portray themselves as rising up against the corruption of the Ayatollahs. These trials are against the followers of Mousavi, a close ally of Rafsanjani, who from the beginning have tried to claim that the election was stolen from them, and in making that claim, were doing everything they could to block Ahmadinejad from taking office. Remember that these two, Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad, squared off in 2005, and Ahmadinejad beat Rafsanjani by about the same percentage he won in this election. So it's very important to understand that this is not Lech Walesa and solidarity rising up against the injustices of the Soviet-imposed regime. This is a fight between two factions, both loyal to the Islamic Republic, none of them particularly liberal or reformist in the Western sense, or very few of them in the Western sense, struggling for the soul of the revolution. But the revolution they're fighting for occurred in 1979.
As the trials got underway, Ahmadinejad's position was reinforced when Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei formally approved his election and hosted a ceremony in his honor. The Ayatollah was robust in the face of critics who say the election was rigged.
The enemies should know what kind of truth they're facing. They shouldn't be mistaken in understanding the Islamic establishment and the Islamic Revolution. The enemies should not believe that the Islamic establishment will be defeated by their comments.
The ceremony was boycotted by Mousavi and others who claim that the government is illegitimate.
The question of Ahmadinejad's position, his strength, really depends on his relationship with the Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the spiritual and political head of the country. Certainly, Rafsanjani has done everything he can to weaken Ahmadinejad, to make him the usurper, to make him illegitimate. He retains, however, Ahmadinejad does, the support of Khamenei. There are clearly some strains there, but there's no question that he will take over as president. Now, the issue to remember is being president of Iran does not mean you're supreme ruler. It doesn't mean that you're blocked so much by parliament as you're blocked by Khamenei. And the question is, what is Khamenei going to do? What does he intend? What is his vision? Khamenei's primary mission that he sees as is to maintain the stability of the regime created by the '79 revolution. Therefore, he does not want to see the kind of open tension that the Rafsanjani-Ahmadinejad confrontation has created. In his mind, he wants to see a clean succession, but he may well bring a third person into the mix. Khamenei does not have a very good relationship with Rafsanjani, we think. I think he has some serious questions of Ahmadinejad, and therefore there are other people like former National Security Advisor Larijani that he may bring up in some informal role to be his real spokesman and one of the real power brokers. That remains to be seen. But one thing is very clear. that Khomeini is very upset with Mousavi and Rafsanjani for challenging the election, that faction is very much on the defensive. Khomeini probably doesn't want to see them fall out of power altogether, but he's trimming their sails. On the other hand, Ahmadinejad himself may wind up having his sails clipped very quickly.
So, what are the things we should be watching for, George, in the coming days?
Well, we really need to be looking for a third party, a third player emerge between Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad. Remember, Mousavi is a creature of Rafsanjani. He is not an independent player. We need to see if this conflict dies down between them. And if it doesn't die down between Rafsanjani and Ahmadinejad, what Khomeini does about this, whether cracking their heads together, pushing one aside, bringing a third player into it, many sorts of things can happen. But I think the one thing the West should not expect is some sort of massive uprising of a solidarity-like movement committed to free speech and democracy. There are some in Iran who take that position, but that is not the general position in Iran. The general issue in Iran is between the old clerical class who came to do good and did very well indeed, and Ahmadinejad, the populist, who claims and may well represent the democratic wishes of the public. I don't think there are very many people in Iran who want to see the Iranian Islamic Republic go away, or really are thinking in terms of Western civil rights. Don't confuse the fact that Rafsanjani is an opportunist and therefore pragmatic with the idea that he is a reformer. The reform he prefers is economic reform that will benefit him.
We have just 1 month until the US set deadline on Iran coming to the table on the nuclear issue.
Well, I think what's going to happen here is that that deadline will come and then the crisis will begin. There's some talk of sanctions against Iran, but that's an impossibility because the Russians and the Chinese won't participate, and the other sanctions are fairly meaningless. One could interfere with air travel to and from Iran, but all the Arab countries won't participate in that, and therefore you'll be able to go through third parties to get to wherever you want. You can inconvenience Iran. You can't do any harm. You could also take military action against Iran, but of course Iran has a nuclear option, and by that I don't mean nuclear weapons. It is the mining of the Straits of Hormuz and the mining of other parts of the Persian Gulf. The ability of Iran to interfere with the flow of 40% of the world's oil out of the Persian Gulf is not to be trivialized. So military action might very rapidly face an Iranian military response that could make the West very uncomfortable. Nevertheless, the growing relationship, which appears to be happening between Iran and Russia, is changing the names of the game. On the one hand, increasing the pressure to do something, on the other hand, making some sort of military action even more risky.
Meanwhile, it seems the protests are continuing. Amateur video posted on YouTube appears to show strong police reaction. Politics, whether in the streets of Tehran or in the mosques of the holy city of Qom, appear to be in a constant state of flux. Colin Chapman, www.stratfor.com.